Happy Friday, YouTube. I'm Nariah Chapik. The weekend is here, which means we have a all-new episode of Pour Another Packers podcast, and the OTAs have just finished. Thursday wrapped up the final day of off-season training. 3 weeks of activity, a lot to break down, a lot for me to cover. I'm going to try to do the best I can to keep this entertaining and not bore you too much, give you some of your complete Packer news for the past 3 weeks, update you on some players. I'm already rambling, so I think it's time we pour ourselves another Packers podcast. So as always, before we get started, I want to thank you personally for checking out the video. It truly does mean the world to me to see the likes and the comments and the subscriptions that pop up, give me notifications on my phone. It motivates me to keep going at this, to keep working at it, to keep putting in the amount of effort that I do put into this. And it's slowly getting better. I sometimes rewatch some of these older videos and chuckle at some of the lack of backdrop I have and my hairstyle at the time. But regardless, we want to talk about the OTAs. That's what we're all here for. That's what the video is titled about. OTA Roundup. I want to break it up a little bit into just the offense and the defense, kind of who's standing out on what side of it. And before we even break down any of the offense and defense, let's talk about our head coach. I think most of you heard last Friday that Sir Matt LaFleur ended up tearing his Achilles in a game of basketball. And of course, I got a notification. I was actually editing last week's video, got a notification. Packers have their first major injury of the offseason. My heart started pounding. I started freaking out. Oh no, what player, what is it going to be, a Jordy Nelson repeat of missing a season or whatever the case may be. But luckily, it was only Matt LaFleur that got hurt. He did have surgery on Sunday. A couple days later, he's walking around now in a boot. He's rolling around in a golf cart. He's got himself a little scooter that he rolls around in. All the history or all the research that I have done in regards to these types of injuries and these types of recovery times, if you're a player, it can be tragic. I mean, you can miss months of football. When you're talking about a head coach, though, someone that just needs to essentially walk around the football field and coach. And yes, Matt LaFleur does have more of a hands-on approach with his team, but this isn't all that bad news. I'm not panicking over this. They actually state that he should be ready by September 5th, which is the NFL opener at Chicago. I expect him to maybe have a little bit of a limp to him, but even when training camp rolls around, he should be good to go. And Matt, all the best wishes. Have a healthy recovery. You have 1 week of mandatory mini camps next week that you have to find yourself going through, and then it gets quiet. We're all going to be bored out of our minds. You're going to be hopefully just doing all the final touches before training camp, and regardless. So let's talk about the offense. So there's no better place to start with the offense than, of course, Aaron Rodgers. So going into these OTAs, a lot of the headlines are revolving around Aaron Rodgers. Is this going to be a revenge tour? Is he going to go on just a rampage of the 2019-2020 season? And I do believe so. I actually had a conversation with a customer. Again, I'm a sales manager at a car dealership. So a customer was there. He's a Seahawks fan. And that's fine. He can be a Seahawks fan. We can't all be Packers fan. But he talked about how Rodgers is a little bit washed up. He's kind of a whiny guy. He's out of his prime. And I love hearing that from people that don't follow the Packers, because that means that you are not expecting the shitstorm that is about to happen in the upcoming season. I do think Rodgers is going to go on a revenge tour. He's coming back healthy. Hopefully he can stay healthy. And then some of the other things that they're talking about too is whether or not they're maximizing the prime time of his years. And I have to believe this is a common concern for any Packer fan out there. And yes, I do believe they are maximizing Aaron Rodgers' prime the best they can. I mean, you talk about getting rid of Ted Thompson, talk about changing the head coach, talk about getting rid of Clay Matthews and bringing in some powerhouse defensive linemen, bringing in a safety. I mean, they have shifted the defense, and I'm going to talk about them in the second half, but they have shifted this team in a lot of ways in just a matter of months to definitely help propel Rodgers and this team to having a successful season. And then the kind of the last thing, because quite frankly, I don't need to talk about does Rodgers look good in practice, because we all know he looks good in practice. But how is he and LaFleur looking as far as their chemistry on the field? And I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. He is right there alongside the coach. He's not, giving any cold shoulders. After LaFleur sustained his injury, there's images of him going up and seeing LaFleur on that golf cart and sharing conversations. I love, again, I've talked about this in my LaFleur video 2 videos back. They're young pups still. They are very hungry, have a lot to prove, and I think you're going to have no issues with these 2 guys getting along. And then I guess I'll say the final statement is the whole beer chugging. Let's just listen to what Rodgers had to say.
As far as those other guys, for some of them, there's finally a talent where they can say they're better than me at.
So hearing Rodgers say that, for some of these guys, there's finally a talent where they can say that they are better than me, is completely uncharacteristic of Rodgers. He hasn't been a cocky guy throughout his entire career, but he's taken this whole beer chugging thing a little bit personal, and I'm okay with that. And to hear him actually call out and say, well, yeah, you can chug a beer, but you obviously aren't even that talented of a quarterback like I am, is pretty awesome to hear. I got a real big kick of it, and I was more curious on what he would say to LaFleur, and he did have a little bit of a comment. But I love to see this kind of a newfound glory, new energy out of Rodgers. It's very refreshing, if you will. So moving on from quarterback to who he throws to. Let's talk about number 1 wide receiver Davante Adams. Unfinished business from last season is what I have written down. So he was targeted 169 times in 2018. He had 111 catches, close to 1,400 yards, 13 touchdowns. You could say he has unfinished business because he didn't quite break those records. But Rodgers wants to target him more. He wants to target him over 200 times this season. He might have to because we don't have a ton of depth at wide receiver. I'll touch upon that in a bit. But why not? I guess with the caliber of caliber of player that you have in Davante Adams, he's going to find himself open. He's going to catch almost everything that comes his way. I don't see why you shouldn't target him 200 times. He didn't practice a whole lot in the OTAs, and that wasn't really because of a major injury or anything. It's more precautionary than anything else. Nothing too serious. But he did participate. He had some catches from Rodgers. I'm sure he's going to look great. And I noticed a theme. A lot of these kind of tier A, tier S players on the Packers don't get a ton of headlines because they just go out there. You already know what you're getting out of them. And so they don't talk a whole lot about them. And that's completely normal. I think Adams will do all of his talking come regular season when he just goes out and scores touchdowns and has a lot of yards. Moving on from there, we talk about the number 2 wide receiver, and this one is completely baffling to me. There's articles all over the place about who the Packers are going to have at that number 2 wide receiver spot. For me, it's completely obvious. Geronimo Allison is the number 2 wide receiver, unless I'm not even going to go down the unless road. He is the number 2 wide receiver, and he's a sleeper. He's flying underneath the radar. I don't know why, there's sports and NFL experts that don't even think of him as the Packers' number 2 receiver. He's clear to me. He has all the skill set. He catches the ball. He can run routes. He got hurt last year, which is probably why he flies under the radar. But Geronimo Allison is looking good in the offseason training. I think he's going to be just fine at that number 2. So let's talk about the rest of the receivers. Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Equanimeous St. Brown are probably your 3-4 when it comes to the rest of the receivers. St. Brown, actually, fun fact for you, St. Brown led the draft class last season with 34 targets. And he didn't drop a single pass. I don't know how accurate that is. I tried to research it. It's kind of hard to find targets and receptions, but that was something I read in an article. If that's the case, he might have that slight nod for that number 3 position, because if he's going to be Mr. Reliable and catch everything that comes his way, you're definitely going to get more opportunities to play with Aaron Rodgers. But outside of that, J'Mon Moore didn't make a ton of headlines. Didn't really hear his name once come up. Kumaro maybe popped up here and there as far as some of the articles out there. Kumaro's a fun underdog, but I don't necessarily find him as a serious weapon. I hope he makes the roster because, like I said, he's fun to root for. Him and Rodgers seem to have great chemistry. But at the end of the day, LaFleur particularly talks about creating an offense built around these guys' strengths. So they don't need to all be Javonte Adams caliber wide receivers. They all have their unique skill sets, and I think one thing that our head coach realizes up to this point is that you build your offense with the players that you have versus just building an offense and hope that the players kind of fill into what you want to do. So I'm loving what I'm hearing from that standpoint. I think that they are confident in what they have at wide receiver. I'm still confident that Jordy Nelson will come back, but that window gets a little bit smaller and smaller. But yeah, wide receivers are looking good. Moving from there, let's talk about other receivers. Let's talk about Jimmy Graham. Now Jimmy Graham made a ton of headlines this last week. It seemed to be the guy that the news articles want to talk about. And Graham in general doesn't like to speak to the media a whole lot. He's kind of a recluse. He likes to, stay away from the limelight. And one thing that I kind of found surprising from my readings with Graham is that he's a perfectionist, and I can relate to that a lot. I myself am a perfectionist. I do a ridiculous amount of editing and work to try to make these videos look the certain quality that I want to, but he becomes very hard on himself, and he becomes hard on himself because he's supposed to be that veteran presence for that tight end group, and he had to learn a new offense last year under McCarthy, which that offense was dreadful. And then now he has to again learn a new offense under LaFleur, and it puts a lot of pressure on him that he has to kind of pick up the plays right away and be that leader among the tight ends. But I don't think he needs to worry about that too much. He obviously still has the capabilities. He still has the height. He still has all the raw athletic ability to be a force to be reckoned with. He's going to get a lot more opportunities in this new offense. He's going to be, they talk about last season that he wasn't always the first or second option on particular pass plays. He was kind of the get out of jail card, if you will. And they talk a lot more about him being more active in that first choice, that second choice of call plays, where Rodgers is going to look to him right away, throw one across the middle, keep his eyes on him, or whatever Rodgers does to make ridiculous throws. And I anticipate Graham's had a great offseason. I really look forward to seeing him progress in training camp come the end of July and August. And I'm not worried about it. I don't know why people want, there's a movement, or we'll call it a movement out there to cut Jimmy Graham from the team because of the cap space that he takes up. I don't know why people want that. I think that, you give him another year. If he can't perform, which might add more pressure to him, but if he can't perform this season, let's maybe entertain that idea. But I want him on my team, especially when you're as thin as you are at wide receiver and you have him on your team. You got to keep him there. He is a go-to target. I hope he has a breakout season, 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. That would be absolutely incredible. Moving from him at tight end to the new guy at tight end, we have Jace Sternberger, showing a lot of flashes in OTAs. This one didn't surprise me too much because I had looked at a lot of the film coming out of college, and I had my preview of that, or my review of that, after the draft. But showing a lot of flashes. He's going to be he's going to play a big role as far as in the offense. He primarily is showing flashes as a catching receiver. Is there any other kind of receiver? There's some worries about whether or not he can block, and he's fully aware of the concerns there. He didn't have to block a whole lot when he was at Texas A&M, so this is kind of a new concept to him, especially if the Packers are going to be focusing more on the run side of it. He's going to have to learn how to block and be more of a blocker in that offense, but he's not afraid of it either. He's aware that he needs to work on that. He embraces that challenge. He doesn't want to just be a receiving tight end. He wants to be known for an all-around tight end, and it's exciting to kind of watch these early glimpses of him, and I look forward to watching that progress as well. Moving on to the offensive line. Not a ton to talk about in the offensive line either. We can talk about Billy Turner and everything that he brings to that offensive line, but I've already touched upon that before. We can talk about Elton Jenkins and how he's actually going to push that starting position away from Lane Taylor, but I don't really think we need to beat that one over the head too much right now. The biggest thing with the offensive line and OTAs, and Rodgers alluded to this in his locker room press conference, is that there's no pads, and that gives the defense a huge advantage. They can essentially just bull rush the offensive lineman and get to the quarterback. When there's pads on, they have a little bit more to get under and block. So I don't see a whole point of breaking down the offensive line, who's flashing, who's not. We know we have a lot of depth there anyway, So we'll touch upon that more later on in training camp. And hopefully I'm going to kind of do more weekly breakdowns in training camp, because these 3 weeks condensed into one video causes me to talk really fast and causes my throat to dry up, which causes me to take another drink. So let's take a break. Whew, okay, final position on the offensive side of the ball is running backs. I talked about Aaron Jones quite a bit last week in last week's video about how he's lost a lot of body fat. He's looking leaner and meaner. A real force to be reckoned with. I didn't talk too much about Jamal Williams, and I think there might be a little bit of reason to that. He has good statistics across the board. He had 3.7 yards per carry in his first 2 seasons, which is pretty decent for a running back. That's off of 274 rushing attempts. And I think the biggest thing to keep track of Williams is the fact that he didn't miss a game in his first 2 seasons due to injury or anything like that, and he never fumbled the ball. So those are very impressive things. Those are attributes that will get you a roster spot and an active role on the offense. But if I have a way too early prediction for Jamal Williams, I do see him shifting to the bottom of the running back depth chart by the end of the season. And that's a way too early prediction, but I really love what I'm hearing. I love what I saw out of college, and the boy's name is Dexter Williams. He fits into this zone offense, this zone, what do they call it, outside zone offense so well. He's a lot like Aaron Jones. He's a little bit heavier than Aaron Jones, but he's shifty. He's quick off the ball. He finds those gaps. He's had some explosive runs in OTAs, and it's just been on display the last 3 weeks. He's a rookie. He has a lot to do to gain that spot above Jamal Williams as an active member of that running backs game. I really like what I'm hearing out of him. I'm liking what I'm seeing from some of the OTA footage that's out there. Get excited about Dexter Williams. He's going to turn out to be a pretty awesome late round pick. A couple last things that I want to talk about. So the tempo. Just kind of wrapping up the overall offense in general. Tempo was kind of a big thing that has been talked about. There's a couple Packer videos out there, a couple articles, but they talk about this being a feature that the offense will be exploring and have on display come regular season time. So what makes tempo so important? So throughout the course of a game, throughout the 60 minutes of a football game, the offense finds themselves in a rhythm, and I think this is something that in particular hurt the Packers a lot in the last couple years, is that they became predictable. They went out there, the defense could see the formations, they watch enough film, they know what's coming. What tempo allows the Packers defense to do, or the Packers offense to do, is break the huddle real quick, rush to that line of scrimmage, run a play, catch the defense off guard. They ran these high tempo formations or plays a lot in the red zone, in particular in OTAs. I'm not sure if that's the best way to utilize it, just because you can easily have a 1st and goal turn into a 4th and goal in a really quick amount of time. Just imagine what Rodgers can do with the idea of playing with tempo in his back pocket, with his hard play counts and everything else that encompasses what Rodgers does to cause the defense to go off sides. Very cool ideas, very cool to hear that this is something that they're working on outside of just normal play calls and different formations on the offense. And it's something that a lot of teams are doing right now too that are successful. You talk about the Rams, the Chargers, Kansas City. Even Philadelphia, they break the huddle real quick and they hit the line of scrimmage and they just go. And I think that's going to make Rodgers happy because he was sick of the stale offense, and it's going to make me happy because I'm taking a drink right now and they're scoring touchdowns. Let's talk about the defense. So if there's one thing that really worries me when we're talking about the defense, is that I am going to be beating this one over the head until I am just exhausted. Is that even a phrase? The defense is going to be incredible. I can't help but just get the chills when I think about everything that's going to happen on the defensive side of the ball. In particular, let's just start off by talking about the age of the defense. We have a very young defense. The oldest player on the team is Tramon Williams at 36 years old. The second oldest is 6 years younger with Mike Daniels at 30, again, probably coming into his last year. And then it drops all the way down to 27 with Hyler Fackrell. 27 years old, third oldest player on the defense. Everyone else on that defensive side of the ball is 26 years or under. That is a crazy stat that I did my own homework on and looked up. Look at Rashawn Gary, Darnell Savage are the two youngest at 21, and then you have Alexander at 22 years old, and these three guys are impact players on the defense. You have Alexander, who's going to be an absolute stud in the NFL, and then you have Darnell Savage and Rashawn Gary, your first-round picks from last year, that are going to make impact, plays as far as this defense is concerned. So, if you are a long-term Packer fan, which if you're watching this, I assume you are, that's very exciting to know that our defense is slowly starting to get built in the right direction, and we're going to have this for not just this season or next season. There should be a sustainable defense moving forward, and they're only going to get better moving forward. So let's start with the oldest player on the team real quick. Tramon Williams, probably coming into his last year as a Packer. And hopefully it's his swan song. Hopefully we can win himself another Super Bowl in Green Bay. He's still looking like a starter for the cornerbacks group. That all is going to depend on how healthy Kevin King will be moving forward. But a lot of high praise for Tramon Williams, and then Tramon Williams has a lot of high praise for Mr. Darnell Savage, who is taking those starting reps with the defense and making a name for himself as a rookie with those first team reps on the defense. But sticking with the cornerbacks, let's talk about Kevin King. He's got to stay healthy. Kevin, you just got to stay healthy. That's all you got to do. You have all the attributes to be a great, if not a star cornerback on the Packers, if not the NFL. He wasn't 100% healthy in OTAs. I'm going to give him a break a little bit. Maybe they're saving him and go ahead and save him for training camp and the regular season. Nothing too serious with his injury. It's mainly, precautionary. He didn't participate in any live team drills, but he did do drills. He did, suit up and was out on the field and is getting better day in day. With him on the field, the Packers are going to be a much better team. So I hope he can get better and contribute to that defense. On the other side of the cornerback group, Alexander. Obviously a big fan of Alexander. Bought his jersey last year. I see great things for him. I'm not going to beat that. Why do I keep saying beating things? What is going on? So with Alexander, very interesting locker room interview. Now this guy I followed very closely. He is I don't know what the right word is. He walks the line between cocky and confident, like some of the best out there, and it leans more towards confident because he has the skill and he makes the plays to back it up. But in this particular locker room interview that he had, I think it was late last week, he's very quiet, abnormally quiet. He's very short on his answers. He seems very focused. He seems like he wants to let his play do the talking. He sees himself as a pro, as an all-pro, and playing in the Pro Bowl after this season. But yeah, they were shooting questions at him, and he was just, just very short answers, like yeah, because that's all I can come up with right now. Yeah. So Alexander, whatever you're doing right now, just keep doing it. Make yourself better. If you want your playing to do the talking, I am perfectly fine with that. But if you want to, crack a little cockiness here and there, I'm all for that because I find myself as a cocky kind of guy myself. Moving on. If we transition then from the cornerbacks to let's go inside linebacker. Let's talk about my boy Blake Martinez. One comment that I heard come out of Rodgers' locker room interview that kind of got me thinking was that Martinez is essentially the quarterback for the defense, and what that means is he has to know when he lines up. He has to read that offense. He has to know where his defensive line is. He has to know where the help is behind him. He has to know what the coverages are around, and then kind of coordinate that and communicate that with the entire defense. Now Martinez has had these responsibilities ever since his rookie season when they put the coach's mic in your ear and they relay the plays to him, and he kind of commands that. So he's coming into his fourth year. He's coming into a potential, unless they tag him and get that fifth year option out of him, but he's coming into that contract year. He came to camp bigger, bulkier. He looks even more like a brick shit house than he did previously. The guy can tackle. He can play football. He's going to play better, and if he's going to play better, the Packers defense is obviously going to be better. Outside of Blake Martinez in that inside linebacking group, you have Sir Oren Burks coming into his second year. Again, another young player. If we review his first season, he didn't play a whole lot last year in his rookie year. He did have that shoulder injury in the preseason. It kind of nagged him throughout the year. and that limited him from getting more snaps. But when he was on the field last season, he made a name for himself. You could hear his name come up as far as tackles and plays that he was making. Biggest thing that they're focusing on with him coming into his sophomore year is his vision and seeing the field and seeing the play develop and be able to kind of react and process that better, and be kind of like Blake is. As soon as it happens, just be there for it. I think that's very exciting. He's already kind of lined up. Burks has already kind of positioned himself to be that other inside linebacker to go hand in hand with Martinez. And if we're gonna maybe throw someone else's name in the ring with that, it's going to be James Crawford. Now, if you are unfamiliar with the name James Crawford, I would not blame you completely. He's looking like a great option on the depth chart at that inside linebacker group. He was an undrafted free agent last season. He didn't actually make his way onto the roster until August. And at that point, he found himself a roster spot. I think he showed up a week into August. Training camp was 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in at that point. He had a big breakout game against Kansas City in the preseason, made himself a roster spot, and then he contributed a lot to the special teams side of the football. Special teams was awful last year. That's part of the reason why Ron Zook is bye-bye, along with a lot of the other Packers coaches. But when you talk about the special teams, he was a bright spot as far as a player on the team. In regards to his coverage, he had 13 tackles, which led the special teams unit last season. He had 1 fumble recovery on the special teams, and then of the 26 flags that occurred on special teams, which absolutely just destroyed us last season, he was only thrown a flag once for I think, what does it say, illegal formation. He lined up wrong. So he wasn't holding, there was no face mask, there wasn't a block in the back. He became a solid option on that special teams unit, and because of that, he has now kind of positioned himself to be more of an active role on the defensive side of the ball. He shows great instincts so far in OTAs. He's very aggressive. He has an amazingly aggressive play style, which is a lot of fun. He can get you in trouble sometimes, but just I think yesterday or on Wednesday, he actually had himself an interception against Tim Boyle, who's an absolute rock star, probably one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And then, this guy intercepts him, which just is throwing, we got to throw this guy a parade. Had the play not been called dead, it probably would have been a pick six scenario. It's just fun to see some of these guys that you're not familiar with their names pop up in some of these articles, and that they're making waves. If we can add depth anywhere on the team, let's do it. That's what this time of the year is for. Next up, let's go from inside to outside. There's no better place to start than our #1 draft pick. Now, I might find myself eating my words when talking about Rashawn Gary, and I hope I am perfectly fine with that. I hope I'm perfect. I am perfectly fine with that. Very confident. He, in his locker room interviews, anytime that they get a chance to talk to him, he's a confident football player. He doesn't have that confident cockiness thing that Alexander has going. It's just kind of, he's quiet, he's confident, he lets his play do the talking in a different way, and he's creating a lot of high praise from the coaching staff. I can't remember who the coach was, but he talked about when they had the opportunity to draft someone like Gary on the team, he absolutely got chills. He knew that although his stats didn't show it in college, you're getting somebody with an athletically freakish ability to play football come to your defensive team and play a role. And my last point when talking about Rashawn Gary, and probably the point that I love the most, and I might have talked about this before, but he doesn't have to be a starter on this defense. You have enough people around you that he doesn't have to go out there and fumble his mind around what's going on and where he needs to be, and he can come in, give both Zadarius and Preston Smith a break, and play a big role on that defense without being the star. Talking about some of those other guys, so the other linebackers, outside linebackers that make up that group, you have Preston Smith, you have Zadarius Smith. I'm going to refer to him as Z moving forward, and then you have Kyler Fackrell kind of making up that offensive line group, and they talk a lot about some of these pressure packages that we will potentially see in the season. They were practicing some of them in OTAs. They do say that they will be implemented come regular season and when the rubber meets the road. But with these pressure packages, they're going to look at having all 4 of these outside linebackers on the field at the same time. Now, what that will look like, in particular, how they drew it up or how they practiced it throughout OTAs, is they had both Preston Smith on one side, you had Kyler Fackrell on the other side, and then you had Z and you had Gary lined up in the middle. And at that point, like I said, with Gary, you don't need to have all the instincts. You just need to go straight ahead, rush through that offensive line the best you can. And you're talking about 4 big-ass grown men rushing at the quarterback. It'll be interesting to see where they use these formations, if they're third down, if they're early down, if it's red zone. Maybe that's the beauty of Mike Pettine's defense, is that you never really know how he's going to implement it or when he's going to use them. But the idea of having, taking maybe Blake off the field and all of your inside linebackers and using these 4 guys, your defensive line, your cornerbacks, obviously, to just kind of confuse that offense is what I love so much about Mike Pettine as our defensive coordinator. Overall thoughts on the defense, without saying what I've already said, well, it's time for us to get ourselves a good defense. It's been a painful journey for us the last decade or so. Did some homework, as I tend to do, made some notes on it. The last time the Packers had a top 10 total defense was 2010. So that was obviously our Super Bowl winning season. We were ranked number 5th in the NFL with total defense. So if you don't believe that defense wins championships, you're dumb. But regardless, if this can become a top 10 defense and you have Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, the Packers will go deep in the playoffs, if not make it to the Super Bowl, win themselves another Super Bowl. Final topic that I want to talk about real briefly before we wrap up OTAs. Yes, I didn't talk about all the intricate details of OTAs, but I'm kind of giving you a Cliff Notes version of some of these players and where they're standing and some of the headlines. But I do want to talk about real quick the softball charity event that took place this past weekend, so it was just about 6 days ago. There's few things that I enjoy seeing more from the Packers than when they get together off the football field and get out and do community events and charity events. One of LaFleur's most emphasized messages this offseason was having his players participate in more off the field team building events, and more than half, so you're talking about more than 45 players actually attended the softball tournament, the softball game that happened last weekend. In case you don't know, these softball games, they had an attendance of about 4,000 people. All the proceeds go to Feed America, Make-A-Wish Foundation, a bunch of other youth organizations in the state of Wisconsin. So it's just an awesome event that all these guys get together. They get to interact with the fans, but I think most importantly, and one thing that I absolutely love seeing from the Packers team is that they're building these bonds, they're building this brotherhood, they're building a connection outside of just football. And that's something that goes all the way back to Vince Lombardi about being better men and not just being football players. And that's really what I enjoy seeing this team do, and something that LaFleur obviously appreciates and knows is an important factor of building a team, a championship team. You had Rodgers at the event, which is something that he doesn't normally attend. You obviously had LaFleur, I think it was one day after tearing his Achilles, he threw the first ceremonial pitch, and that shows a lot of grit. It shows that it means a lot to him, and if it means that he can go out there with a torn Achilles and support the team, it sends waves throughout the rest of the organization about what it means to be a Green Bay Packer. He's already emphasizing that, or he's already instilled with that belief. I'm already rambling. I don't want to talk about too much, but it's absolutely awesome. The softball charity event, it's a great event. I would love to attend it one of these years. I'm not sure how hard tickets are to get for it, but these guys are going out bowling, they're getting together, they're eating together. Absolutely awesome. Gets me giddy about what this team could become. It goes further than the X's and O's, and it's just great. So with that, I appreciate you checking out the video. I appreciate you sticking around. Hopefully you appreciate some of the content that I was able to throw out there today. Next week is mandatory mini camps, and with mandatory mini camps, it's going to be real interesting to see if Josh Jones finds himself there or not. I think there are fines that get involved if you are not there. It's only let's see, the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, so it's a 4-day mini camp next week. It's a lot's going to be answered about Josh Jones, whether he truly doesn't want to be a Green Bay Packer, or if he's just going to show up and do his job, and then we'll figure out what happens in July. So keep an eye out for that. I will touch upon that next week, probably another quick hits video for time's sake. And yeah, if you like the video, go ahead and click the subscribe button down below. Make sure you like the video. I know you hear that in a ton of YouTube videos. If you're still watching this, it truly means the world if you subscribe. It motivates, it could eventually pay some bills, which is awesome, and it doesn't cost you anything. So again, I'm rambling. Talk to you later, and I will see you on the internet. Thanks for watching.